Okay. So welcome everyone to this month's Donor Database Experts webinar, and thank you for joining us. So this month we are talking about database spring cleaning. We know it is not spring, but it's the eternal spring of cleaning out your database. For some of you, your new fiscal year just started, which is a great time to take a look at the state of your database. I'm thrilled to be joined by two of my teammates, Denise Wooden and Steph Williams. So thank you both for coming back and joining us. All right, so we want people to think about how they can get rid of those digital dust bunnies that are clogging up their database. And we're going to kind of do this in layers. So we're going to talk about the clutter. We're going to talk about the sort of foundations. We're going to talk about the processes and then kind of the final cleanup. So going from kind of the micro to the macro today. So first topic I'm going to throw out, cleaning up tables, because I think a lot of people don't think about those underlying things that can cause all kinds of havoc, whether you're doing constituent entry, gift entry, the things that are in your tables really drive a lot of your data. So Steph, I'll start with you. How should people approach table cleanup?
I think there's a couple different ways. I think sometimes when we come in and do assessments for clients, one of the first things we do is pull out pretty much all of the data that lives in tables and look through and see, what's being used, how often is it being used, how I'm in Minnesota, how many different ways is Minneapolis spelled? Things like that. And sometimes it's such a quick, satisfying cleanup. So I think a few different ways. I think either if you have the time to pull things out and take a kind of broad look at how things are coded, or sometimes for me, it's as we're entering things, as we're pulling reports, and oh, I always have to remember to pull it. I have to include all three versions of this. Just make a note of it. And then it's kind of, I joke, sometimes it's like Friday afternoon projects, right? And so, just kind of make a list of those. And then honestly, I think the way they have it actually in NXT is a lot nicer now. It's a lot cleaner to see. So you get to go through and you get to do your little physical, like your actual like table cleanup if you've got some that are obviously the same and can be merged. It's a very satisfying cleanup project to do. And then I think one of the other things that we like to do when we're in a new database is, okay, which ones are you using now? Let's move those to the top of the list so we don't keep making bad ones, keep using old ones, and then work our way through the old data. So it's one of those things that can be very satisfying very quickly, though, if you're also a big data nerd, like most of us.
Guilty. Denise, what about you?
I would just add to what Steph is saying and also include in the security piece of things. So
Oh,
if you
yeah.
are seeing all these table entries that's the same spelling, it's like Steph said,
Yes.
Minneapolis spelled like three or four different ways, seeing where that's coming from. And is it the same person that we need to maybe evaluate if they should be adding table entries? Is it a bunch of different people? And also looking at everybody's security kind of as things are changing and you see a table that might be getting out of control, security is definitely one piece that I always also take a look at. And I would echo what Steph said about the table cleanup in NXT. It's very satisfying to say, take all these values and replace it with one and remove my table value. So seeing that easy layer cleanup is really nice.
I
I've
do
said
like in NXT the piece where it tells you what record it's being used on. I think that
yes.
is one of the best it's not even new anymore, but one of the best improvements in NXT versus, we do that sometimes. We'll get in and it's not obvious where it is on a record, especially we look like a gift coding sometimes, and it's maybe buried all the way down in like a write-off or an adjustment or something like that that you can't query on super easily. But to have that, where you click over and you go, view uses and it gives you all the records that it exists on, is super helpful too.
I think coming from three hardcore database view lovers, if we say something is good in NXT, it's really, really, really
It's
good.
really good.
The
It
one,
had to earn that status.
yes, the one place I have to say, and it's very niche, but where I see some of the craziest table entries that always need some cleanup is actually in the education
Yes.
module, the school names. So first, I'm going to use my grade school, which I have no idea if they, are Blackboard clients, but just as an example. So because I don't want to pick on anybody. So Sacred Heart School. It could be Sacred Heart School. It could be Sacred Heart. It could be Sacred Heart SCHL. It could be SCRD, HRT, SCL. You'll see the same entity essentially in that list of educational institutions so many different ways. And then the same with, the places the various alums have gone to, especially if it's something, I'm a Pennsylvania gal at heart. So if it's a Penn State entity, because first of all, there's so many campuses, there's so many programs. I think that is one that if you use the education module, go in there and definitely take a look and take some time to clean that up. And then, as Denise was saying, lock down who can do what to where. That's one of the things I love about NXT, and it's always changing so quickly, is the way that they have those security settings just getting more and more and more sort of micro. It's really amazing. Um, um, I think the other thing I want to talk about is not just the duplicates or inconsistencies, but that historic value that no one exactly remembers the history. So how do you tackle those? Because it could have value, but if you don't know, I mean, what do you do? How do you deal with that? Denise, do you have any thoughts around that?
So with some of the historical values, I look at kind of the time value that it's going to take to change it if there is a change that needs to be made. So how much, what's the investment in time? Also, like doing some digging, what was the purpose of that value when it was created? Is it really where, it was it something that lived in that time and it doesn't evaluate like go forward? Or does it relate to something now and we need to reuse that value and keep it going and looking at the holisticness of the database with that table value?
Steph, what have you found when working with clients who have historic stuff in the database that no one can remember the why?
Yeah, I think again it's two pieces. One is anything relying on it still. Is there anything that's helpful there kind of year over year, things like that. Now if we're talking, you know, 20 years ago and it was, oh, someone told us to put it there when we migrated from another database and we haven't touched it since. Kind of a different conversation like Denise was saying, what's the value of it? We do sometimes recommend, I think, through sometimes if you've got stuff that's there that you don't want to lose, but you don't want to keep that coding active, we have sometimes done like actually historical, like historical note, historical action, something like that as an actual table entry, because you know that I'm gonna go actions. Actions tend to be where we see the most craziness sometimes. And for action types. And so you do that because in the description it's probably already there what they need to. It's worth having, but not at the granular level that it was before. And so kind of that compromise there. We see that too, when we do big migrations and it's maybe like old letter coding types, things like that, where the detail you need is somewhere else and they're probably never ever going to go back and pull a report on it, but you don't want to leave it blank either. So there's kind of a balance there on is it still being used, how was it used, and what do you want it to look like? I think as we move into NXT too, a lot of those things that were kind of easy to ignore in the past show up a lot more. I think, we see them in dashboards. So that's a good place where people are like, what did you do? Where did these all come from? Like, well, they've always been there. They've just been inactive. So you haven't seen them when you've been adding
Yeah.
new records, but now that you're looking in a dashboard or in a filter, they're all showing there. And so kind of this kind of old data that you could ignore before is a little more obvious now. So
Yeah. One thing that I would add too is if you're looking at any of the gift coding or anything like that, making sure that you're not changing something that finance relies on. I used to live in the finance world and we connected a lot to our database. So making sure that you're not doing something, yeah, it seems like a historical, but you may not want to break their linkage if they ever use it and if it's relying on finance. I do think that that's an area you can improve and move forward and make streamlines and cleanliness to it, but it definitely needs to be in a cohesive conversation with finance.
Right, because sometimes things like, is it subtypes that can drive the GL
Yeah.
code? Yeah, so be careful around that table.
Yeah.
The other one I want to throw out that I know we always talk with our clients about attributes. Because first of all, there's attributes for everything or custom fields in NXT speak. And the thing we find a lot when we do assessments is that people are putting things in attributes that, first of all, there are places in the database for that information to live. And I always say that attributes are where good data goes to die. So I think really taking a look at attributes and is there another home for that data? And again, also, does anyone remember what that attribute means or why it's there? Steph, do you have any suggestions for good ways to approach attribute cleanup?
Yeah, pull them all out and see just how bad they are bloated.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you can look at them in a query, things like that, but sometimes if you can yank them all out into an Excel or, in a Power BI or whatever you want to do with them, but yank them all out in Excel, make a huge pivot and see, oh, we've got this attribute is, both ways. This attribute is on, 1,000 people, or this person, some people have 10 of this same attribute, and vice versa. We created this attribute and it's on like 2 records. That's an easy, like, let's get rid of it. I think I'm going to go back to the dashboards in NXT too. If you're using dashboards in NXT, attributes are kind of MIA still. So if it's something that you really want to use to drive data in and out of, got to put it somewhere else. Attributes can be very, very good. They can also be, you said, kind of a bottomless pit sometimes. So being very strategic about them in general.
Yeah, Denise, what do you see around attributes and what are you telling clients?
Before you decide to put an attribute or if you need to clean it up, make sure that it's defined, make sure that you know what you're doing or the purpose behind that. A lot of cleanliness and a lot of cleanup that needs to be done is because people aren't thinking through the long-term strategy of it. So taking a step back and looking at the overall strategy of how you're using the data, what you're driving, is the attribute the right place or can you move it to somewhere else? It's there now, but is there a better field? I also think this is as we're going into the NXT and into the web view, unified view, it's really taking that look at like, how is that coming over right now?
Yeah.
Is that showing up how we want it to? The custom fields has, after you get so many, you have to go to the next page type of thing, next like tab over. So just what is the best value and the best place for that so that you're getting what you need out of the database too for everybody involved.
And I think, Steph, as you said, if it's an attribute for one or for two, that's not an attribute. That's a note. So yeah, definitely thinking on that. So folks, please, if you have any questions, please do
Please.
feel free to jump into the Q&A, ask them. We're happy to answer them in the moment. We have short attention spans. We can handle that. Um, Constituent codes are another one that we see with some of our clients where they've just gone a little too granular. Denise, can you talk a little bit about that?
That's definitely another one that I look at holistically of that with you have people with 1,000 and then people with a couple and the people with a couple like creating a specific membership piece and a constituent code or more of a granular thing that only has 2 or 3 people in your entire database, changing that into a different place. That's where we found we've had some clients that have 80, 90 constituent codes and getting that list down to
180.
yeah. Getting that list down to that, 10, 12, 15 max type of codes that we would recommend and making sure that it's an alignment across the database.
And Steph, what are some of the constituent codes that we do recommend that people should have?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the best way to think through it is what is like the highest level kind of way you want to group people and split them in and out on reports. Because I think a lot of people know this, but some people might not. And we're talking Razor's Edge, very Razor's Edge specific right now. I'm aware, but it also flows through to your gift. So whatever their primary constituent code is at the time of the gift is what gets coded as the gift constituency. So that is sometimes like an untapped thing that can be incredibly helpful for people, especially if you have someone who maybe was a board member for 2 years, but then was an employee and so you can capture what their giving was as a board member, regardless of the campaign fund and appeal, at only during the time they were a board member. So being very intentional about how you use them there. So the list, I'm going to miss one or two here, so feel free to chime in and add them. But I think our high level ones are board, and that would be kind of any and all board members on the constituent code. So board member, employee, individual, volunteer if you have a big volunteer program. Some places will do an alumni or student if you're, if that's relevant to you. Some healthcare organizations will also do like a physician in addition to employee if you're tracking them differently. And then organization. Now, depending on what your fundraising is, I can easily be convinced that that you need a separate constituent code for like government. Especially if you want to kind of pull that reporting in and out, if you get a lot of government grants, things like that. So that very high level, the idea is that it basically doesn't ever change except, with like a board member or an employee thing. What is the main highest level way they're connected to your organization? So you don't want to see every individual board type or committee, but you do want to see board member, and then that's a trigger to people who go to the record to go, let's go look at the volunteer module, let's go look at the membership module, or wherever you're storing board or volunteer employee detail. So
One of my favorite features with the constituent codes too, and the way that we look at them is with the unified view, it's right at the top. So if somebody new comes into your organization and they're looking at different records, they can see right at the top that this is a board member or this is an employee. I need to be cautious as I
mhm.
move forward. It's not just, a general record of an individual. But if that list gets too long at the top, then you have to like click down another layer. So that's really with keeping it to the highest level is really important.
And I think too, that's we're having a hierarchy that the team has decided on. Is board more important than alumni, for example? And probably, but thinking through it that way as well, because that top one in the order you put them is what's going to sit, up top. Yeah, and I'm hoping, I think one of the other things we see that can be overused a lot in database view were those pop-up windows. This is a board member. Um, and hopefully you're just able to see that, in the lower left of the screen if that's the top one and you don't have 20 gabillion constituency codes. So hopefully will help with that too. Although I can't believe how much we're like saying we love NXT today.
I
Um,
know.
but the fact that now you sort of get almost like an alert banner at the top
Yep.
now with things instead of the pop-up, I think still use it judiciously because, if everything is an urgent banner, then nothing is an urgent banner. But I do like that feature a lot. Okay, let's get into
Yes.
campaigns, funds, and
There's a
pre.
question that just
Oh,
popped up. I don't know if you
yes.
noticed that. I
Thank
don't know
you.
how I noticed it, but it's if there are key indicators for individual and organization, is it really necessary to have a constituent code for individual and organization? I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to hear
Yeah,
what your
go for it.
gut reaction is, Denise.
I'll let you start and then I'll add in because I do
I
have some
think
gut reactions, but I'll wait to see what you say.
I think you need some sort of catch-all. You will always want a constituent code to be required, always. And so what does that mean if it's not, if they're not an alumni, if they're not a student, if they're not a board member? I would rather see an individual and organization because I think a lot of times companies or organizations want to see, they look at their giving by individuals versus organizations separately. I don't want to see a donor constituent code or a friend. We've seen people sometimes just do friend and things like that instead that can kind of encapsule, is that the right word?
Yes.
Incorporate either, whatever. And so that's kind of my answer there. I also don't mind if organization gets broken down more. So if it is government, foundation, corporation, business, things like that that help you drive where's your money really coming from. So
I
you
think,
need, you need something as a catch-all.
and to add on to that, I think this is where the hierarchy becomes really important
Yeah.
because individual and organization are normally your last two down on the bottom. Because if there is something else in the top of the list that makes more sense and it is a better relationship to the organization, you want to keep that higher level of the top of the hierarchy. Um, so that's where I would say that the hierarchy comes into play too with those codes that yes, even though there is a key indicator of that, you should have a code because every record should have a
You want it
constituent
required.
code.
Did you
We
see the
just got a
next
good
question,
question
Denise? That's
about that.
perfect.
Yeah, we just got a question about hierarchy, although I want to talk about one more thing. Let's say someone came in as individual with their constituency code, but then they do become a board member. Would you then just pull off that individual constituency code? Because
Yep.
then it's essentially meaningless, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So no reason to even keep it on there. Okay.
No, I always say if
Um,
they have a different code that's a more meaningful, take the individual off because that becomes meaningless. So
right. Okay, so we got a great question here about, is there an easy way to create that hierarchy? If a person is an alumni and an employee, for example, it's so easy to add the other constituency code. But is there a way to easily standardize the order when additions or changes are made, or maybe even globally if you really have a mess? So I said, let's tackle this in two parts. Let's talk about standardizing the order, and then tackling a mess. So, Steph, do you want to go first?
I think the standardizing the order is something that just needs to be agreed upon. It needs to be kind of a business rule, a standard operating, kind of process for the organization. And then you can throw a whole lot of audit queries together for it and look for anybody who has, some of the ones that we'll set up kind of right away when we do a project like this is, has a constituent code, one of, alumni, employee, this, and has a constituent code of individual. Great. Yank the individual off. And that's kind of a global thing you can do. Things like that. You can also, in the query, you can actually look when you query on a person, you can query both on primary constituent code and any constituent code. So that's a way you can handle that too, is maybe primary constituent code equals individual and a constituent code of something, anything other than individual. Um, so that's kind of the one way to kind of review them as you go. Now to get you to a fresh start when you really have a mess. It's a process, but again, it's a very satisfying one. I kind of do it two ways. We typically will sort of augment all the ones that are currently in your system and then re-import them in the right order. So you get a list of everybody who should be this and this and this, and then you re-import them in the order that you want them to be on their record. And then you can go through and delete all the old ones. So, take your current individual and make it individual 1Z, whatever you want to do, re-import the new ones. And the reason I like to do it that way is you can then very, thoroughly or quickly or however you want check and say, okay, everyone who used to have a board still has a board and they don't also have an individual. So I went through that process both at a nonprofit and then have done it a few times here in this role. And again, this is very satisfying cleanups. So the piece
yeah.
to go with that though that I mentioned before is to make sure your gift codes are going along for the ride at the same time.
Denise, do you have any other thoughts around that, cleaning up those, or cleaning, getting a good hierarchy in place and cleaning it up?
I just always, along with what Steph said, you're going to get into that messy middle where it seems worse than before it gets better. So just keep fighting through that messy middle of getting to all the cleanup. And I always say do it on a weekend or like on a Friday when nobody's there so that you can kind of create that messy middle, have the strategy coming in to clean it
Mhm.
up and then do that messy middle when not so many people are using the database or let them know that you're going to do that because it may alarm them too.
And you can always pull kind of a subset out, like maybe your board members. Someone handle those, if you don't have a ton,
Yes.
have someone go through them one by one and do those. But the vast majority of your records you can probably handle through, imports and global changes and things like that.
Yep.
And again, I think this is another reason to really lock down who can change and add what in the database.
Yes.
Because then you don't have people deciding, well, I think this person needs this constituency code, or we need this constituency code. Okay, campaigns, funds, appeals, and packages. So I know on previous webinars we've talked about this, but it just does seem to come up a lot. So Denise, can you give a quick, I feel like I'm asking you a quiz question. Can you give a quick overview of what a campaign, a fund, an appeal, and package should be? Give your elevator one sentence for each.
So campaign is always my biggest umbrella, kind of at the top of the biggest buckets that we use. And then I break it down to fund that is more of the accounting, the restriction that I rely heavily on finance for. And then appeal and package go hand in hand with the appeals are how the outreaches happen, how you are contacting the donor, what are you kind of the strategy, and then the package is the segmentation of that appeal. So we see a lot of different people adding different appeals instead of adding packages for the one appeal. So just keeping in line with that, the appeal is over the package. Did I miss anything?
Nope, A plus for me anyway. Gold star. Uh, and Steph, so what are some of the issues that you see when we do assessments around campaigns, funds, and appeals and packages?
Yeah. I think like Denise said, we see a lot of times we'll see separate appeals where packages could be useful. And sometimes that's a history of, lots of different things. Sometimes it's from a previous migration, from one database to another, things like that. Sometimes it's just, the easiest way to set it up. And so that's how people handle it. But I think I'm going to go like with an event for an example. If you've got a gala, yeah, gala, however you want to say it, and maybe you've got tickets, you've got sponsors, you've got table hosts, you've got an auction, and you've got donations. The best way to handle that is, a separate appeal for each year, and then all of those as packages underneath, because then it gives you all the options you need to look at it at, kind of an individual piece or as that umbrella um, for an event as a whole. And then I think the other piece too is making sure that your packages are named consistently or using the package category, so that you can pull, it can be a big lift up front to get them all coded correctly, but it makes for some really great reporting. You can look at it and say whether that's, Power BI, it's in Excel, it's, in a dashboard, whatever. I could pull out and say, okay, give me the last 4 years of the gala appeal, and I want to see the revenue by package category, with each appeal. So then I don't have to go, okay, last year we called the auction this year we called the auction this. I can say it's, the auction package category, and you can kind of see it broken out. So you've got some consistency over time too. One of the things we've seen kind of a lot lately, surprisingly, is kind of a flip-flopping of the appeal and the funds in Razor's Edge. I'm not sure why. It's been kind of a thing we've seen, and it kind of comes and goes with different clients and things like that. But I think some of that is just that there might be more flexibility in the appeals, and it feels easier to create lots of appeals versus lots of funds. I'm not sure, but we'll see it sometimes where maybe there's separate funds for the gala registration, the gala tickets, the gala, those are the same thing, the gala sponsor, the gala donations versus appeals, so, and packages. So
And I wonder if that's because in the fund, in the GL codes, people aren't utilizing
yeah.
all the possibilities of the GL codes, including, the project
Yep.
level, all of those pieces, so you can get things going where
Yep.
your finance department wants it. But that does bring up another thing that we see all the time, which is, your appeals should have obviously the year that the event, the direct mail, whatever happened. But Steph, should your funds and your campaigns
No.
have years in them? I didn't even get it
No.
out.
No.
No.
No years on your funds. No years on your campaigns. There are, I think maybe one time I've been convinced otherwise, but in general, you want your campaign to be that biggest bucket, like Denise was saying.
Mhm.
And so we typically recommend from a starting point, let's see what we've got: annual or, direct mail, or kind of whatever your general one is. Annual, events, capital, grants, plan giving,
Endowment.
endowment, if you got that. Yeah. So kind of those highest level buckets. And think of it as, I kind of think of it as every time I'm, asked to run a report, it's usually, do you want capital included or not? Do you want events included or not? What are those really big kind of buckets that you want to very easily pull in and out of your reporting or break out separately? And then no years, because you've got your dates, you've got your gift dates in there, you've got, and if it's an event where it might cross over, then you've got your date, your year and your appeal. So
That's one of the
Um,
things that I always say with years and consistency and naming. Naming is very important, and having a naming convention can make the world of difference as you're
mhm.
pulling items into dashboards, but also if you pull it out and do a Power BI or a Tableau or something else outside the system, the naming convention can become really a useful thing. And consistency is the key. I'm okay with your calendar year or fiscal year, just depending on which organization you are, but consistency, keeping it the
Yeah.
same and making sure that it is clearly defined as you build out new ones.
I also like to, if you're doing fiscal year, actually putting like FY 27 sometimes
Yes,
helps too.
yes.
yes.
Especially, I came from not one of my first kind of long-term roles in a nonprofit fundraising. We were on a October through September fiscal year, and our largest gala of the year was always the last week in September. So it was beyond confusing if we looked at our like 2026 gala. We're like, September 2026 or like the next, so we were like, we're either going calendar year or we're going to put FY27 in the name. So just again, kind of naming convention, make it as obvious as possible when someone stumbles onto it, what they're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Think of your fellow future fundraisers down and data people down the road. We have a success story in the Q&A. So Madeline is saying that she pushed her organization to use appeals and packages, and now it's made our historical comparisons and monthly review
Amazing.
revenue reporting. I love to hear that, and um, I'm sure it was a hard push, and you have to really present yourself as the expert. You know the data. I think sometimes this is where being able to show a super messy spreadsheet of what the stuff looks like now and how it's going to look if you fix it
Hmm.
can help people to understand kind of what you're saying. Madeline says appeal performance analysis reports are my favorite. Oh, we love to hear that. We love a good appeal performance
I feel
analysis
like the
report.
best way to sell that to your team is I can give you an ROI. I can give you an ROI and a year over year without having to, manually go through and be like, okay, was this the auction? Was this last year? Was this year?
Mhm.
And so any sort of consistency is huge.
Right. I mean, we love pivot tables and formulas as much as the next person, but makes it so much easier if you have all the good data and everything to
Hmm.
back that up. So now we want to talk a little bit about fixing your foundation. So this is still some of these same data issues, but these are ones where we see some real, I think, underlying issues, maybe where discussions haven't been had, or people again are just making stuff up as they go and not talking to each other. And the big one are the addressee and salutations. That's one of, I think, our big cleanup projects with a lot of clients. Steph, when we go in and do assessments, what types of things are we usually seeing with those ad cells?
Anything and everything.
Yeah.
My
I was like,
instant
I'm not really
response,
sure here.
everything possible.
How many different ways can we spell or abbreviate? And I'm trying to think through if there's any kind of funny anecdotes. We've seen some things, we've seen lots of different ways to denote that someone is deceased.
There you
Is that what you were going to
go.
say? I know that you were going at. We've seen it a lot of different ways. We have seen, I, the sky's the limit on the things we've seen in addresses and salutations. I think transparently, some of that is the lack of like the defaults in NXT yet. And so as people are bringing their online donation forms and their online event registrations into NXT, they're kind of having to go back to that drop down instead of having that default that they can have sometimes. So it is, we have a couple people on our team who, when I say, hey, we've got someone that wants to work on their addresses and salutations, are like, yes, we can beat them up because it is, it can be such a mess. I think they're the big piece that a lot of times people don't take advantage of enough is the smart field, smart feature. I don't know what to call it, and ad sell. So you'll see where they have both, the single and the joint in multiple different ways, not knowing that it can, dynamically add the spouse name in the end, things like that. So
And class year too. I love that it can do
yeah,
the class year
yes.
for academic institutions. But yes, people, I'm begging you, please stop killing off your constituents in your ad sals. Use the deceased checkbox. I don't know what it's for because it's just
Parentheses,
the worst.
deceased.
Yeah, either RIP in the
RIP. We did see
addressee
an
is
RIP one
just
time.
yeah.
Or a cross. We've seen crosses,
Yep,
like
I've
little
seen
cross
crosses.
symbol in the
Oh,
actual ad cell. Mhm.
yeah.
Which
Please,
I
I'm
understand
begging
if you need it for your, maybe for like your tribute wall, or something like that. Or I think I've seen it like in planned giving, or they're a way to denote that, if they were a donor, they're no longer with us.
you.
But not in your ad cell.
Well, and I think though if it's for a tribute wall, that is a great place to be able to use the additional
Hmm.
addressees, because then you can have it for an annual report, a tribute wall, things like
Yeah.
that. But just having it in the primary, oh man, that's hard to look at. So yeah, I would say that's one of my big things. Denise, what do you see around ad sales?
I was just going to say with recognition too, is looking at the holistic picture of recognition and taking a step back. And with ad sales and any information that you're trying to keep in there, you know that organizations can't have those additional addressee salutations. So anything that you're putting in there that would also relate to an organization record, you're going to have to move to another place. So then you're looking for two places for something that might be better off in a single place. So that's one of the things I've seen ad sell additional addressee salutations get kind of out of control with lots of additional ones, and that's where I tend to see it is with recognition. I've also seen where people ask on appeals to respond your addressee salute, like how would you like to be addressed? And then they have an additional for every single appeal that they've sent out. I do not advise that at all. If you want to collect that, maybe collect it once a year and then move on and address them that way. And also make sure if you're checking the editable box, there's a reason and a strategy behind that. Do not mark everybody editable and don't mark it editable without adding a note. One of the biggest things with cleanups that we go through is we go review those editables and nobody knows why it was marked editable and nobody knows why it was
Mhm.
changed. So adding a constituent note on why, or if they called in and they want to be recognized as this, that's going to lead to the editable checkbox. Or, they fill out a form and this is what they want their name preference to be. So just thinking about that, I would also say that nickname preferred name is becoming a bigger thing that we are using in addressee
Mhm.
salutations as we go forward. Also with the use of NXT and the web view, people are really relying on that preferred name, not thinking of it just as a nickname, thinking of
Yep.
it as like, what do I call them? So we've definitely seen a big change in that piece too.
Mhm. I think that's nice
Visual.
because it opens up that option. And now with Power Automate and things like that, you can easily say, whenever there's um, maybe once a night, once a week, whatever that looks like, when the first name is blank, copy, or I'm sorry, when the preferred name is blank, copy first name to preferred name. And then you can just always rely on the preferred name in addresses and salutations and not have to have another kind of smart feature in there for it. So,
Mhm. And that actually leads into a really good question that we got.
mhm.
We have donors who request to be listed in annual reports by a different name. For example, John K. Smith, Johnny K. Smith. We record that as an alias only for those who have a different recognition name. Would you recommend to add this field for all constituents for data consistency? Is alias the best way to record that field or addressee salutation? So I definitely have thoughts given this is for an annual report, but Denise, what's your take on it?
My first thought is alias is not a bad field, but alias is a really hard field to make global changes to. I made the mistake of adding an alias and needing to delete it to hundreds of thousands of
Buy
records.
one.
And you can only do that one by one. So anything that you're putting in alias needs to be definitely a smaller piece and not something that you're ever going to want to globally change. Not that you're going to change the actual name that is associated with that recognition, but you will maybe change the table type or need to get rid of them at some point. So I would definitely don't know that I would think of alias as the best place for that. Um, we've used the membership module for recognition purposes. Razor's Edge is also coming out with a recognition piece, that kind of stuff. So definitely there are other options to make it consistent across constituent organizations and individuals.
Steph, what about you?
Rare cases where I would almost prefer an attribute over an alias
Yeah.
because it also, that also lies on both individuals and orgs, and you can query on it, you can control it, you can export it. You have a lot more control over that than you do an alias. But
I think what I've seen with a lot of clients and what I've used is the um, using an additional ad sal and having that be the annual report
Mhm.
addressee. And then in terms of getting the data to your printer, when you're fixing everything in Excel, have both for all your constituents, the primary, the annual report, and
yep.
just seeing what's in there. I like it because it's all then in one tab. Your all the ad sales are together because my concern down with an alias down the road is that somebody's going to forget that that's where they are, which I think we see a
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
So that would be one of my thoughts. Okay, well let's go into the home stretch. We still have so much more to talk about. I think, ladies, we're gonna have to do a part two of this. But right now, to bring it on home, Let's talk a little bit about you've done all this work. You've done your spring cleaning. The dust bunnies are gone. How do you keep it clean? Steph, you mentioned audit queries. We love an
I
audit.
sure did.
Talk about audit queries.
We have, I wish the other Steph on our team was here with us because she could tell me right off the bat. We have probably about 100 audit queries that we use kind of as a starting point, kind of broken down by different groups that we like to put out there. It's one of the things that we'll do when we get a new client. We want to just kind of see where the data health is at right now. It's a thing that we like to give. It actually provides a really great training opportunity for people to learn both Razor's Edge and even their like specific data when they're new to an organization. But we have a whole kind of suite of audit queries that we like to set up and kind of a high level and a very granular level look at them. So you know anyone who's in this query, this is what you need to do with it. In this query, this is what you need to look at. So we mentioned constituent codes for some of them. Another one I would see would be we were just talking about something else before and it just slipped my mind now. Like memberships, if you're tracking giving societies and memberships, maybe hopefully you've got a good workflow on keeping those updated, but hey, here's at the end of the quarter, here's people that should be in this, but are, listed as this by their things like that. I think the other thing too that is helpful and that, when I've been directly in the nonprofit side, a lot of times I was overseeing kind of gift processing and data teams, was have them audit their own work so that when they do the gift, and sometimes they'll be like, I know it feels kind of putsy, but oftentimes you'll hear people go, I get it now. Now it's a really great way to understand how the data you enter here, what it does later on too, and kind of getting that full picture of it. So we have a lot of audit queries we like to rely on and kind of pick and choose based off of what's going on in a certain database. But
Well, it
I would
sounds
also
like
add that I've used audit queries with gift officers in
mhm.
different situations to help drive home actions, opportunities,
Oh yeah.
required fields that you can't necessarily mark required. But I've been in meetings with them monthly, quarterly, where I bring up the audit query and it's all their data. And I'm like, okay, we got to fix all these things before your reports are going to pull right. So let's do this before you go on to your next strategy meeting. Kind of
Here's why
that.
you're not getting credit for your meeting.
Yep. That checkbox is not cleaned. And then I had one gift officer that I worked with and I loved, but she kept entering the name different every single time. And we had gone over like copy and paste this in, and she had a lot of opportunities. It was for a capital campaign. And we went one by one and I watched her clean them up. She never did that again. She did them right after that. So she
Mhm.
kept putting them in the wrong order and like, nope, we're going to do this together. So using those audit queries too as a teaching moment within the data teams that you're working with, but also with the greater fundraising groups too.
it
I think
sounds
it
like
helps to identify
Madeline.
patterns too. So,
Yes, 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 great we see patterns. It sounds like Madeline, who's put something in the Q&A, is of the same mind, Denise. So she says, schedule data audits, and I've threatened my teammates that I'll make them help me fix it if they break it. They're all terrified of Razor's Edge, so they prefer to just not touch my database. I think sometimes that's a lot of us feel like, don't touch, let me do it.
mhm.
Yeah, because if you break it, you fix it. What are some other things that people can do to keep their data healthy? Denise, what are some other things that you think of?
Sometimes I think taking that Friday afternoon, you're kind of at the end of your rope for the week, you're in your mental capacity, but just kind of doing some overall holistic data
Mhm.
checks and seeing what the data looks like after, a couple weeks, a month, a quarter, pulling a report that you have forgotten about, or looking at, one thing that you forget about until year end is like overall pledge health. What does that look like? Can I do some of that data health? Also, with the required fields changing and your availability to make some of that stuff required and use of defaults in the unified view at this point, making sure that, addressee salutations are there, constituent codes are there, anything else that you would use a default for in the database side of things, making sure that but I loved a good Friday afternoon of just kind of going to poke around and looking at the database as a holistic view of spending a couple of hours in that. And I would also say that audit and health checks are some of the things that go to the bottom of your list all the time. But
Mhm.
when you go to pull your reporting, it can make a world of difference of being able to pull the report once or having to go back and clean up data to get to your report if you stay on top of those audit checks.
For sure. Steph, what about you? Any last thoughts on keeping the data clean now that you've cleaned it?
Same thing. I love my Friday afternoon projects. Kind of same idea there. I think sometimes I would maybe just keep a list, like if I was working on a big mailing list, like, oh, sometimes it's kind of making a job, making a note, or I'd maybe like save as a query quick, like go look at this, because I think all of us on our team, and I'm guessing a lot of people that are watching this too, are people who, when they see something wrong, want to dig into it and fix it. And you can go down a lot of rabbit holes very quickly. So for me, sometimes going, okay, save as, I got to go look at this later, but I won't forget about it. Here's the thing to go back to when I have time. I think it's helpful. I think right now, in the, for some orgs, this is maybe a downtime. I don't want to say that out loud. If you're, after a fiscal year has calmed down, or before, or, things like that, it can be a great time to get ahead of some of that stuff is going to kind of come back to bite you before year-end mail list pulls. That's year-end mail lists are coming up sooner rather than later, I feel like. And so, what are some of those things are always a problem going into a busy season? And what can you get ahead of now? Is it maybe, can you run an NCOA update now and then go check for any of those? Can you check is now a good time to check like your seasonal addresses? I'm just trying to think through some of the other stuff that always, you go to pull them list and you're like, oh shoot, all of those or all of these, or I did a lot of audit queries too, just around like newly created records. And I think that's more important now as things are coming in through NXT, because you don't, like Denise said, you don't have as much control over required fields anymore. So, things like that, or post event or leading up to event, all those fields that, you're like, I'll deal with that later. I'm too busy right now. What are those kind of projects now?
I know we recommend one thing to do weekly is just a new gift and new constituent review, and sorting those as many ways as you can. The gift ones around sorted by the appeal, sorted by the funds, sorted by the campaign, and make sure everything's in alignment, and kind of go from there. So for last thoughts, I want to set our audience up for success. What is some low-hanging fruit? Like if you were going to clean a database and you wanted a nice, easy project that's going to make you feel really, really good, what project would that be? And Steph, I'll start with you.
I wanted to think a little more. An easy project?
Well, while you two think.
Yes.
So you guys think about this. So we would love to know what topics people might want for webinars. So while Steph and Denise, I put them on the spot while they're thinking, if you want to put anything in the Q&A around topics that you might want to see for future webinars, please do. We love hearing that. We present these monthly for you. So this is your time. We appreciate your taking time that we know you just don't have to spend with us. So absolutely, if you have any suggestions for topics, please pop that into the Q&A. All right, Steph, any thoughts for an easy cleanup? Or
I can
Denise,
go.
you
I
can
can
go.
go.
Go for
I
it.
can be. Relationship types. How many
Oh,
times is son, brother, dad, father, mother, mom in your database? And it's an easy one to go clean up.
I may or may not have just asked our team on the side to see if anyone else had favorite projects at the same time, which I'm sure you guys both may have seen at the same time. Mine was going to be like anything where you can have like duplicate info. So like my first thought was like duplicate constituent codes. Go look and see, do they have more than one constituent code, and are they both individual? Just get one out, like clean it up. It's nice to work through. I'm gonna share we have someone on our team who loves duplicates in general, so duplicates are an easy one. Duplicates are one that I love to go at before a big mail list, because sometimes it's a very easy ROI. I can quickly say, hey, our team cleaned up 100. And this was when I would try to make the case to maybe purchase something else to help with duplicates for a quick project. For me, it'd be like, hey, we cleaned up, 250 duplicates and it cost us $1 a piece. There you go. I saved us $250 for this mail list or whatever. That's kind of an easy one. So duplicates are mine, and I'm looking at see what else everyone on our team said. Phone and email types.
yes.
That's a great one. I love how many times we log into a database and there is a cell phone, a cellular phone, a mobile phone, and sometimes even a mobile cell phone. All the same thing. So cleaning some of those up, and then solicit codes too sometimes can be very redundant and kind of overlapping. So those would be a couple.
And those would be quick wins because as we were saying now with NXT, with how easy it is to merge table types, and
Hmm.
that's all that would be. So I think that would be very satisfying and easy and maybe kind of get people feeling successful and like they can do more of this. Because cleaning your database, it might seem like, oh, I have to take time that I don't have to do this, but as Steph and Denise have both said, it really will save you when you're having to pull those annual reports or those mailing lists. So, absolutely. All right. Well, our next webinar is going to be on August 18th, and this is going to be around the Great NXT migration. So things are changing fast. Blackbaud is introducing so many new things as they get ready for sunsetting the database module. And so we will just have an update about that, our thoughts about how and best practices for what to do and things that we're seeing and hearing. Um, and so we will do that. Ooh, we have a vote for a deeper dive into ad sales in RE for a topic. We love that. You have no idea what Pandora's box you have just unleashed there, David.
I would like to share that when I mentioned that we have a couple people on our team that love a good ad sale project, I did in fact get a message on the side saying my ears perked up from someone on my team, and I was like, "Yep, I know." It can be a very overwhelming process, but it is so great once it's done. And there's a we could talk about that forever. So
Absolutely. All right. So yes, we hope we see you in the future. So I'm just going to get from both of you, since we do have just a couple more minutes here, just a final thought. What would you want people to know about either keeping the database healthy, cleaning it up, or some best practices that you just love and feel are overlooked? Denise, I'll start with you.
I would say just one thing as you're thinking about a database and the cleanliness, never be embarrassed about what's out there. I always tell people if you say you have a perfect database, I question you. It's just like people that say, I have a perfect marriage or I have a perfect this. It instantly makes me like, do you really? So as soon as someone says they have the perfect database, I'm like, do you really? So never be embarrassed of what's out there. Everybody has their messes that they want to clean up someday.
I think I've probably said this in another webinar I've been on with you, Marlisa, but I still remember, and I should probably at some point figure out who I can credit this to, but way back when I started in Razor's Edge and went to like an RE 101 training, constituent coding and things like that. Whoever the trainer was in that, from Blackbaud, made a joke about how like your data health is like laundry, and no matter how much you stay on top of it, there's always going to be more. And I just kind of keep that in mind too. Like you might get through a huge cleanup project, and then 2 weeks later, you've got to clean it up a little bit more. But I think the big point is let's figure out what clean looks like so that at least you keep going back to the same, the same thing every time, right? And so get ahead of it, get it now. And then how do you make sure it stays clean, and that's where those weekly, monthly audit queries come in. The audit queries are, like Denise said, often get pushed to the bottom of your list, but sometimes it can be a great chance to get other people on the team involved in it too, and maybe have them learn to respect a little bit of the data work that you do too. So, yeah.
I think that's really an important thought, Steph. As you guys both know, I recently presented at a conference just kind of talking about database health, and the conference was construction themed. So I talked about everybody wants the shiny glass high rise, and for a lot of people, what they have is like a haunted plague pit with a shack over the top of it. But you're not going for perfect because, as Denise said, if you say your database is perfect, we are immediately going to side eye you. You're going for usable, and usable in a way that everybody, you pull a mailing list and it's not a Dantean level of hell to do that. Instead, it comes out fairly clean. You might have to do a few tweaks, which leads you back down a cleaning rabbit hole. It's a whole cycle, but that's okay. I think, yeah, you just want to really make your database usable. So, and by the way, we have another vote for an ad sal. Um, based webinar. So I think the people have spoken, and that's
Hearing it.
definitely going to be coming up. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you everyone for giving of your time today and joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next month. You will get a recording of the webinar. So if you just want to listen to our words of wisdom again, you want to share them, you were busy on a phone call, didn't quite get this, whatever, that's so you should be getting that probably Thursday. That'll come out. So again, thank you so much and take care.
Thanks, Melissa.
Bye.